Okay, we're on. Getting ready to start in a couple of minutes. Hope the sound is working okay this week. Okay. People telling me the sound's okay this week. So we'll just wait another minute for 6 o'clock and then we'll start. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to continue on with this readings from the Sutta Nipata. I'll be using a Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. We're going through the chapter 5 of the Sutta Nipata, which is the chapter on the way to the beyond, the Pārāyanavagga, which begins with 16 Brahmin students coming to see the Buddha with a concern sent by their teacher. And the Buddha pretty well dismisses the teacher's concern pretty quickly. And then he goes through the 16 students and gives each one an opportunity to ask a question. And we'll start now with, we're doing 4 at a time. They're fairly short. Each one's counted as a sutta, and the whole thing together is called a wagga, or a chapter. So we're up to the 5th student, Dhotika, and he says this: "I ask you, Blessed One, speak to me of this," said the Venerable Dhotika. "I long for your speech, great Rishi. Having heard your utterance, I shall train for my own nibbana." "In that case, apply ardor," Dhotika said the Blessed One. "Be judicious and mindful right here. Having heard the utterance from me, you should train for your own nibbana. I see in the world of devas and human beings," this is Dhotika again, "I see in the world of devas and human beings a Brahmin owning nothing, traveling about. Hence I pay homage to you, O universal I. Free me, Sakya, from perplexity." He calls the Buddha the universal I as a kind of an honorific. It's an unusual one. It doesn't occur, as far as I know, elsewhere. And he addresses him as Sakya because he's of the Sakyan clan. And then the Buddha says something that's significant. He says, "I will not be able to free anyone in the world, Dhotika, who is still afflicted by perplexity. But understanding the supreme Dhamma, you will thereby cross the flood." So the Buddha first says he can't free anyone who's still in a state of perplexity or confusion. That's quite important, and it's a central point of the whole Buddhist teaching, that our liberation depends on ourselves. No one, no man or Dewa or Brahma or even the Buddha can free us uh, externally. All the Buddha can do is to show us the way, but we have to walk the path ourselves. You will thereby cross the flood. Okay, then the dialogue continues with Dhotika saying, "Take compassion, instruct me, Brahma, in the state of seclusion that I can understand, just as space is totally unobstructed. Right here I would live, peaceful and unattached." Um, the state of seclusion, viveka, has three degrees. There is bodily seclusion, mental seclusion, and seclusion from the base. That is a kaya viveka, chitta viveka, and upadi viveka. Bodily seclusion is achieved as soon as one goes to a quiet place and sits down, whether it's in a room by yourself, close the door, or whether it's in the forest. It's just secluding yourself from external distraction. That's sufficient for the first level. Mental viveka is more difficult. It's secluding the mind from uh, the proliferations and the streams and of desire and the confusion and so on that come into the mind. And anyone who's done any meditation at all will know that chitta awake can be very difficult at times to achieve. And upadi awake is when the practice is successful and one is uh, totally secluded from the influxes of samsara, and this is the realization of nibbana. And this is what Dhotika wants, what he's asking about. And he compares it to space, which is totally unobstructed. Right here, I would live peaceful and unattached. Can maybe do a short digression here on the Buddhist understanding of space. Is considered in some lists it's considered an element. There's the four elements, but sometimes it goes to six, adding space and consciousness. In the Sarvastivadin school, space was considered unconditioned along with nibbana. In the Theravada school, it's held not to be so, that space is either conditioned or non-existent or conventional. And space is considered in three aspects. There is conditioned space, is like when you dig a hole to make a well, you've obviously created a space that's obviously conditioned. Also, conditioned space would be when you meditate on the space casino. You create a space with your mind. Space, as we understand it conventionally, as the distance between points, is considered unreal. It's just a mental or mathematical abstraction without any basis. So the Buddha says, "I will describe that peace for you, Dhotika. Seen in this very life, no matter of hearsay, having understood which, living mindfully, one can cross over attachment to the world. And I delight, great Rishi, in that supreme peace, having understood which, living mindfully, one can cross over attachment to the world. Whatever you comprehend, Dhotika," said the Blessed One. And this is the last stanza here, and this is the Buddha's actual instructions to Dhotika. "Whatever you comprehend, Dhotika," said the Blessed One, "above, below, across, and in the middle, having understood this as a tie in the world, do not create craving for various states of existence." So whatever one whatever arises to one's consciousness, whatever one cognizes and perceives in the world, whether it's internal, external, above, below, or in the middle, as it says here, to see that as a tie, as something, if it's a samsaric object, if it's a conditioned object, a sankhara, then it's something that if we cling to it, it will bind us to samsara. And we have to let go of it all and not to create craving for the various states of existence. So we come into being, we come into rebirth through the force of craving for existence. There's a powerful impulse to be in some state of existence, whether it's in the sense desire realm or the form realm or the formless. And if this is one of the three kinds of tanha, there's the craving. There's the craving for sense pleasure, the craving to be, and the craving not to be. And the craving for sense desire at our level of existence as humans, it's the most obvious, it's the noisiest, it gives us the most trouble on the surface level, but it's actually not as deep, as profound, and as firmly rooted as the desire to be, which has to be overcome for liberation, and it's only really overcome by the arahant. So those are the questions of Dhotika. And then the next Brahmin student takes his turn. This is a fellow named Upasiva. And he starts out, alone, Sakya unsupported, said the venerable Upasiva, I am not able to cross over the great flood. Declare to me a basis, O universal I, supported by which I might cross over the flood. Contemplating nothingness, mindful, Upawissa, said the Blessed One, supported by there is not, cross over the flood. Having abandoned sensual pleasures, refraining from perplexity, night and day see into the destruction of craving. So the commentary makes some explanation of this. It said that this particular student, Upasiva, was a practitioner of the formless abidings, and he'd mastered the base of nothingness, kinchayatana, and that it's according to as it's laid out in the commentary, what it means by taking that as a support is to take that as an object and on emergence from the state, and one sees the impermanence and unsatisfactory nature of even the base of nothingness, and then so in other words, it's using it as an object or a basis for insight, for vipassana, and then seeing through it and attaining to nibbana. So this is obviously practice at a very deep level. And again, the Buddha says in this same stanza, having abandoned sense pleasures, refraining from perplexity. So, and this you'll see in this whole Vagga, there's a repeated refrain that sense pleasures and or sensual desire, really, and confusion or perplexity are to be abandoned. And night and day see into the destruction of craving. And of course, craving is the tanha, is the second noble truth, and the third noble truth is the liberation when craving is no more. Then Upawissa speaks, one devoid of lust for all sensual pleasures, supported by nothingness, that is the base of akinchayatana, having discarded all else, liberated in the supreme emancipation of perception, would he stay there without departing? The supreme emancipation of perception, and this again is explained as the base of nothingness is the last or highest state in which perception really functions in the ordinary way. The next stage is the stage of neither perception nor non-perception, where perception is too subtle to be related to ordinary perception. And then beyond that is Nirodha Sampati, which is cessation of consciousness and perception. So this is not to be, the base of nothingness is not to be equated with nibbana, of course, but it's having abandoned a great deal of the baggage of samsara. And he asked if one could stay there without departing. And the Buddha says, if he would stay there without departing, even for a multitude of years, O universal I. Oh no, I'm sorry, this is Dhotika continuing. No, I'm sorry, I missed, excuse me, this because there's repetitions here and I look away, I missed the paragraphs. The Buddha's reply was he basically repeats what Upasiva said and affirms it. He said, one devoid of lust for sensual pleasure, supported by nothingness, discarding all else, liberated in the supreme emancipation of perception, could stay there without departing. Then Dhotika says, if he could stay there without departing, even for a multitude of years, O universal I, would he become cool, liberated right there? Would the consciousness of such a person pass away? So again, the commentary explains that staying there without departing refers to one who is reborn into that realm. This is one of the four stations of formless rebirth, that is mind only. One can attain this as a meditation attainment in this life, realize the base of nothingness, but one can also be reborn into that state. And a multitude of years is, in the case of base of nothingness, is 60,000 kappas. So an enormously long time. One can stay there without departing. And then Dhodika's question, which I already read, was, would he become cool, that is, attain nibbana, liberated right there? Would the consciousness of such a person pass away? The Buddha says, as a flame thrown by a gust of wind goes out and cannot be designated, so the Muni, liberated from the mental body, goes out and cannot be designated. The distinguishment here is mental body is referring to someone in that state of nothingness. There's no physical body, and the mental body is considered to be the Chaitasikas. So that is feeling, perception, and mental formations. So one in one of the bases of the formless abidings, they're also called four aggregate beings because they have only the consciousness and the mental body. They don't have the physical body. And the Buddha says here, as a flame thrown out by a gust of wind, goes out and cannot be designated. This is an image that occurs also in a sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, where the Buddha is talking about the fate of a Tathagata after death. And he says, it's in answer to questions, he says the Tathagata after death, you cannot say he exists. You cannot say he does not exist. You cannot say he both exists and doesn't exist. You cannot say he neither exists nor not exists. And the questioner is perplexed by this, and the Buddha says it's like this fire. And guess they were sitting outdoors by a fire. He says, if this fire were to go out, could you say the flame had went to the north, to the east, to the west, to the south? No, you would have to say none of these directions makes any sense. So it is with the case of a Tathagata after death. So one liberated from the mental body goes out and cannot be designated. But how does one who has gone out, but does one who has gone out not exist? Or else is he intact throughout eternity? Explain this matter to me, O Muni, because the Dhamma has been understood by you. So this is the question of survival of the enlightened person after death. And for the worldling, for the unenlightened person, they always see it in terms of existence or non-existence. The Buddha's reply, there is no measure of one who has gone out. There is no means by which they may speak of him. When all phenomena have been uprooted, all pathways of speech have also been uprooted. And that's the end of this section. So that's quite clearly stating there the inexpressibility or ineffability of nibbana. There's no way to speak of it. We can't. Now, if you start trying to define it in terms of existence or non-existence, and so on, eternity or annihilation, you just get all muddled up. You cannot express it, even for the Buddha, who knows it better than anyone else. It's impossible for him to express in words the nature of nibbana because it's beyond the limits of our speech and our thought. So the next questions are to Brahmin name of Nanda. There are Munis in the world. A Muni, by the way, is like it literally means a silent one. So it means like a holy person, a hermit. There are Munis in the world, said the Venerable Nanda, as people say, but how is this so? Do they declare one who has knowledge a Muni, or one following a particular way of life? Not by view, not by learning, nor by knowledge, Nanda, do the skilled here speak of a Muni. There are Munis, I say, who live remote, untroubled, without wishes. Those ascetics and Brahmins, said the Venerable Nanda, who say that purity is gained through the seen and heard, that purity is gained by good behavior and observance, that is, the rites and rituals, who say purity is gained through numerous methods. Living restrained, there, Blessed One, have they crossed over birth and old age, dear sir? I ask you, Blessed One, please answer me. So he's asking if someone who follows the Vedic religion rigorously will be liberated. Those ascetics and Brahmins, said the Blessed One, who say that purity is gained through the seen and heard, that purity is gained too by good behavior and observance, who say purity is gained through numerous methods. Though they live restrained there, I say, they have not crossed over birth and death. Those ascetics and Brahmins, said the Venerable Nanda, who say that purity is gained through the seen and the heard, by good behavior and observance, through numerous methods. If, O Muni, you say they have not crossed the flood, then who in the world of Devas and humans has crossed over birth and old age, sir? I ask you, Blessed One, please answer me. See how many of these questions come back to the question of the issue of birth and death, the existential dilemma. This is underlies many of these questions. I do not say of all ascetics and Brahmins that they are shrouded by birth and old age. Those here who have abandoned the seen, the heard, and the sensed or cognized, and all good behavior and observances, who have abandoned too everything of numerous kinds, and having fully understood craving are without influxes. Those, I say, are persons who have crossed the flood. So there must be a complete abandonment of all of samsara and all its products, all sankharas of all kinds, uh, all objects of consciousness, everything that's seen, heard, and cognized, all behavior and observances, everything of numerous kinds, and to understand craving. So this is the objective and the subjective side. Abandon craving for the objects and abandon the objects. You know? And then having fully understood craving, they're without influxes. So they do away with the samsaric process. They break the dependent origination. Then they have crossed the flood. And the last one is a question of Hemaka, and it's shorter. Those who in the past explained things to me, said the Venerable Hemaka, before my meeting with Gotama's teaching, saying such it was, such it will be, all that was hearsay, and all was an increase of thought. I did not delight in it. So a lot of the teachings in the world are just create more confusion and more spinning out of narratives in the mind. Declare to me the Dhamma, O Muni, the destruction of craving, having understood which, living mindfully, one can cross over attachment to the world. The Buddha's answer, the dispelling of desire and lust, Hemaka, for things that here are seen, heard, sensed, and cognized. For whatever has a pleasing nature is the state of Nibbana, the imperishable. So again, we come back to the central theme, the abandonment of desire for objects of the senses. Having understood this, those mindful ones are quenched in this very life, and always peaceful they have crossed over attachment to the world. So that's pretty brief, that last one. Those are the 4 students that I'll cover for this session. And you can see that the common themes are how does one cool the mind and escape from birth and death? And the Buddha's answer is some variation on the idea of abandoning attachment and desire and cutting through perplexity. We had that one student who was an advanced meditator, could enter the base of nothingness, and he asked some technical questions about that. You know, the Buddha talked about using that as a support, because at that point you've abandoned everything else, but then you also have to abandon nothingness to realize Nibbana. Okay, so I'll stop there and stay on for a bit and answer questions. So just put your questions in the chat if you have anything you'd like to discuss. Let's see, we've got something popping in already. If the Brahma gods can see, hear, and walk around, then can a person also be in jhana state while doing those things if advanced enough? Generally not. The state of consciousness of a Brahma is equivalent to jhana, but it maybe not exactly the same. And a human being in jhana, although there is still thought conception, so theoretically there might even be speech, but I think if one was to engage in speech, that it would be so disruptive that the jhana would be lost. Certainly in the higher jhanas, there's no question of it. It seems in these verses the Buddha does not talk about dukkha, anicca, anatta. Your thoughts? No, though he's not using that language. He's talking about abandonment, relinquishment. This seems to be the theme that he comes back to again and again. Abandon the objects of samsara. So you can see the Buddha can approach the questions, can approach the Dhamma from many different angles, and it seems to be the major emphasis he's putting on here is relinquishment, particularly of sense objects and sense desire, which are two different things. But also in that one case, the desire for being comes up, because one who's in a state of nothingness is not caught by sense desire at that time. While meditating about the four great elements, it struck me that always must be a fifth hidden out there, otherwise it would be no karma, and that element is volitional thought, which in other words is consciousness. Yes, consciousness is sometimes listed along with the four elements. The four elements refer to strictly the physical world, and the fifth element is consciousness, and sometimes the list includes a sixth element of space, which is really, when you think about it, required for the other elements to have to be displayed. He's talking about ending upadana, but the framework of what the mind uses to let go of this upadana is not explained in these verses. Did the three characteristics come later? I'm not sure of the chronology of when he first starts speaking about dukkha, anicca, anatta. It certainly is found in separately in many places. Speaking about dukkha, anicca, anatta, and the three together come up in some places. I think in the Anguttara and the Samyutta. So that particular formulation, maybe you're right. Maybe it was a formulation later in the Buddhist life. Does the Pacceka Buddha have the 32 marks of a Mahaparisa like the Sammasambuddha? Yes. I think there's some difference in the marks. I don't recall the detail, but they do have the marks of a great man. How can Nibbana be deathless when consciousness is temporary? Is it like being in dreamless sleep? Well, again, you're in the same. You're in the same, coming from the same place as the Brahmin student who wanted an answer about the nature of Nibbana. It cannot be understood. It's neither being nor non-being. It's neither existence nor non-existence, or neither nor both. It's outside of our ability to speak of it. We can get a little closer to maybe understanding it if you think it's instead of thinking of temporary or eternal, think of timeless. It's outside of time, akaliko. Did the Buddha say about Devadatta that he become a Pacceka Buddha, or is it commentary? I think it's commentary. It is interesting that these Brahmins presumably were well versed in eternalism. Their tradition were very receptive to the teaching of Naroda. What are your thoughts? Well, this was actually something like this was discussed by Bhikkhu Bodhi in the introduction in his own writing. And he's of the view that these weren't ordinary Vedic ritual practitioners, but were more like samanas. And since a couple of we covered one today, a couple of the dialogues reference the base of nothingness, which is not really part of the Vedic tradition, but it's part of the samana tradition. They were probably somewhat outside the mainstream of the Brahmanical Vedic teachings. Whether they were completely outside and were Hermetic samanas is also doubtful, because they do seem to phrase things in a way that a Brahmin would, calling the Buddha a rishi and so on. But they were not just ordinary ritual priests. They were already, I think, profound meditators. Can artificial intelligence potentially realize in the Nibbana element? I think that's very doubtful. I don't think artificial intelligence could ever really even be conscious, in my opinion. Not gotten stuck by anything, he is truly quenched. You reach the far shore. So we could say Narodas, in a sense, is letting go of all views, and then Vimudi would occur simultaneously. Yes, all views, besides, but also all craving, views and craving. Um, that when it's actually Nibbana is closer than you think. It's as soon as you stop doing samsara, then Nibbana naturally manifests. You're doing every moment you're doing samsara by craving and confusion and views, and you just keep playing the game. You just keep running more and more through this maze of samsara, and you just stop. Then the only alternative is Nibbana. What are your thoughts on using mantra throughout the day to control your thoughts and still the mind? What is the best meditation technique we can use in everyday life? Yeah, I think that mantra can be used quite skillfully. It's quite a potent instrument for stilling the mind, to keep the mind from running off into endless proliferation of thought forms if you're running a mantra. There is some scholarship that suggests that some samanas were actually from the Vedic tradition. Yeah, I think there was some crossover between the two. By the Buddhist time, certainly they were enough back and forth, but they did actually have two different origins. The Brahmin or Vedic tradition came in with the invading Aryans, which was hundreds of years before the Buddha. They came in, so they were already well established. Uh, but the Samana tradition was probably indigenous to India. It was probably a Dravidian tradition. What is meant by moment to moment? Um, uh, that's pretty straightforward. It just means in this moment, be attentive to what's present at this moment, and then in the next moment, there'll be a different constellation. Be aware of that, and just keep moving consciousness through moment to moment. Don't get stuck on trying to stop the flow. That's why Nibbana is different than suicidal thoughts to cut off, because you let go of the idea of suicide too. Yes, you let go of being and also of non-being. If you cling to the idea of non-being, it's just as bad as clinging to the idea of being. Do you have any advice on changing your sleep schedule? I want to be able to wake up earlier, but I'm having a hard time. Um, yeah, the only simple thing is, go to bed earlier. You can go to sleep earlier in the evening, then you can wake up earlier. Uh, Maybe that while changing schedules, getting your body and mind adapted to the new schedule, you may have a few nights with insufficient sleep, but then you'll get back into a new schedule, and you'll be comfortable again. Do you think there was a chronology to how we answer these questions? Some of the later questions seem to dwell more into sunyata, which may be more in the lines of the three characteristics. That's quite possible, because the Buddha puts off the questions of Mogaraja, who ends up being the second last to ask. But it's said in the commentary that he kept trying to ask the question, and the Buddha would say, "Not yet, not yet, not your turn yet." So he did seem to want to take the questions in a specific order, and that may be that progressive kind of order. What will be the duration of each moment? Very, very quick, very brief. There's a lot of discussion around exactly how long a mind moment is. What can uh, down at the most uh, rudimentary level. Abhidhamma talks about uh, single moments. It's hard to put a clock rate on it because they didn't have the technology or the understanding of time being measured the same way we do. So it's hard to make sense of it. But certainly a tiny, tiny fraction of a second. Do Devas and Brahmas have an ego? Do they think they are individuals separate from the whole universe? Yes. Yeah, they're still some of them become sotapannas, but um, most Devas and Brahmas are still unenlightened, and so they still have a belief in a self. I think technically, like the Dravidians in India aren't indigenous, but migrated from modern Iran about 3,500 BC. Yeah, okay, but they're still, um, who is really indigenous anywhere? But they were certainly there long before the Aryans. So even on that time frame, you're suggesting they would still be at least 2,000 years before the Aryans. Can an ascetic achieve nibbana without hearing a dhamma only by himself? What will he be called? A Pacheka Buddha. There's an interesting book by Ajahn Dhammaka, Footprints in the Dust, that explores the gradual spread of Vedism eastward. Indo-Aryan people seem to precede the spread of the Vedic teachings. Why is it to me that these questions that the Buddha answered in Sutta Nipata are very different than the Buddha in later suttas? Is his way of teaching, it's like he is emphasizing for monks to be a Dutanga. Well, he's in this particular sutta. He's not addressing monks. He's addressing these Brahmins or Samanas. So you'll find that throughout the canon that he'll adapt the tone and style of his teaching according to his audience. Anytime I do breath meditation, I become controlling of the breath, and they don't happen naturally. How can I let my breath stay automatic and not be controlled? Yeah, that's a problem some people have, and it's a difficult one. Obviously, when you're not meditating, you're not controlling your breath all the time. You don't need to control your breath. I mean that should be obvious. And if you have that problem that you can't separate looking at the breath from controlling the breath, that's something you really need to work on, because you need to learn that skill of surrender and letting go. In my experience, you can ask yourself if this fits your case. Most of the people who have this difficulty, this also have the same problem generally in their life, that they're uncomfortable if they're not in control of things. They need to manage everything. They can't just surrender and go with the flow. So it's something very important to learn. It'll benefit your whole life if you can separate the observation, conscious observation, from volitional control. There are two separate things, and it's subtle, and it's something you have to kind of find for yourself, that key. But just try and relax and observe the breath, and don't be concerned. Don't worry that you're not going to breathe properly, or it'll be too short, too long, or whatever. The body will take care of itself, as it does in your ordinary daily life. Do Buddhist and Vedanta practitioners ever meet and discuss filling holes in historical accounts, drawing on what they may be able to offer each other now? Yes, some of that happens informally. I'm not aware of any kind of ongoing formal dialogue between Buddhist and Vedanta. It would be an interesting discussion. Is Mahayana Buddhism more interesting in the idea of an Atman than Theravada? No, Mahayana Buddhism is also based on the idea of emptiness, sunyata, anatta. So it's and they perhaps even speak about it or emphasize it more than Theravada does. How to convince someone who wants to suicide not to do so? That's very difficult. I don't know. There's got to be skillful ways of approaching that. To I would think to give the person some kind of hope, and also if they have if there's any possibility of them understanding or believing in an afterlife, to warn them suicide's not the end and that you're going to just make your next existence worse by committing suicide. It's always going to make your situation worse. Have you done any guided meditations that can be listened to? I've done a few. You can find on my website under Dhamma Talks, and then the section on meditation. You can scroll through it and find there's a few, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 guided meditations in there. Did the Buddha ever achieve Nirodha Sampati before his enlightenment? It seems to come out of nowhere later without explanation. Well, technically, Nirodha Sampati is not possible to be realized except by a anagami or an arahant. So no, he would not have realized that before his enlightenment. If the TV show Ancient Aliens approached you to advise for a Buddhism and Aliens episode, would you consider advising and being on the show? Well, I would consider it. I'm actually doing I'm doing something tomorrow evening, actually, with I've been asked to explain about Dewas and Buddhist cosmology to a UFO group, and it'll be on online. Okay. Okay, I think I'll let you all go for now. And this week was different. I did it today on Friday instead of the ordinary Thursday. It was just this week I had an appointment I couldn't get out of. So, but we'll go back to the Thursday schedule next week. Someone's asking about the group that I'm going to talk to about UFO Dewas, the UFO group. I'll put the link in here. Yeah, it's open to anybody. I'll just put the link up in the chat here. You can go to that link. It's a website that has the information. Okay. Bye all.